A Bernie Sanders campaign event was shut down this weekend in Seattle by Black Lives Matter's protesters. Let's take a look.
Thank you, Seattle, for being one of the most progressive cities in the United States of America. Ask him.
If you do not listen to her, your event will be shut down right now. Right now. Make a decision now.
We're gonna let you on the mic. We're gonna give you the mic. We will, after Senator Sanders. After Senator Sanders.
Tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of the ruthless murder of Michael Brown. It is time that we honor that here and now. Bernie says that he's about the people and about grassroots movement. The biggest grassroots movement in this country right now is the Black Lives Matter movement. So right now, we are going to honor this space, and we are going to honor the memory of Michael Brown, and we are going to honor all of the Black lives lost this year, and we're going to honor the fact that I have to fight through all these people to say, my life matters!
I want to say, John, is I hope that the Black Lives Matter protests doesn't interfere with Occupy Wall Street's takedown of Elizabeth Warren.
Jesus Christ, yeah.
JR, could we go
Or
to...
Blowhards of America interrupting yet another Donald Trump speech. Yeah.
So Bernie Sanders, so I'm white, so to comment on Black Lives Matter, I'm sure I'm missing a lot of things. I just want to say Bernie Sanders was fighting for civil rights before those people were born. But I don't know if that matters or what. But it seems weird that they're attacking. It'd be literally like Occupy Wall Street people attacking Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. I was for it at the Netroots thing because nobody ever covers Netroots anyway, and it doesn't really mean anything. So I thought that was a good thing. The fact that it even got national media attention for Netroots was a good thing. Nobody in the national media ever covers Netroots. That got covered, and it helped him be a better candidate. I think he is a better candidate because of it. In fact, he had a black person he appointed to be in charge of maybe his press secretary now or something, but he introduced him right in Seattle. So I think he has become a better candidate. I think this protest was misguided. I'd like to hear what JR has to say about it, if we could.
Okay, so I was reading the statement that apparently there's a press release from the Black Lives Matter Seattle group that was saying how the target isn't always necessarily Bernie Sanders. First of all, from my thoughts, I think they're continuing to target groups, or at least campaign events where he's speaking, because you saw how basically his people are allowing. I mean, you see this at any other campaign event. They're getting hustled out of there and grabbed and snatched up, as we would almost expect. So the stage is easily taken in these events, as we saw at Netroots, as we saw here, because there's a feeling of, okay, well, let's allow everyone to speak, and then once that happens, I think it begins to happen every time. Now, as I was saying before, if you're just getting lip service, which is what a lot of this press release was saying, there's a lot of white liberals that'll say, yes, we're on the side. Yes, we believe Black Lives Matter. Yes, let's do this. But then nothing gets done. So then the push is now to say, let's do something. What are you going to do? Now, it seems, and by the way, your history of doing something in the civil rights area, yeah, that's cool. But when there's a new civil rights fight, if you're just going, I did something in 1965.
That's true.
Yeah, it's different. But what it seems is Bernie Sanders is putting together plans and is actually doing something actively to do something about it from his position as a senator and potentially a presidential candidate. Once that's happening, again, as I said on the last one, you now have someone that's going to conversate with you about it. The problem is no one listens normally. Seems like he's listening. I don't know if there's other events that I've missed where he's been like, ugh, and he blows people off and says, you know what I did in 1965? If that's what his persona is, which I don't see, then there's a reason to do this.
Yeah.
I don't see it happening here. But their platform, at least again, from this statement, is saying they're going with, it's not Bernie Sanders who's doing the problem. Now, they'll bring him up because he's at these events, but that there's things happening within Seattle that people think don't happen in Seattle. Because as Bernie said, Seattle, you're the biggest liberal city in the country, and thank you for being so liberal and all that stuff. The point apparently they're making is you're not as liberal as you're claiming to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Again, I think it was at the wrong timing to do it, honestly.
They look pretty angry.
I'm sure that Bernie Sanders would give them an audience whenever they wanted. I'm sure he would listen to their concerns. You know, I think the people that they should be protesting is Hillary Clinton, maybe.
They're not going to make it to the stage of Hillary's.
That's probably
the one
why.
thing.
Really fast to that, I mean, they need to get security. Not specifically in case this happens again, but we were talking about beforehand, what if it was psychos with knives?
With a knife.
He would be a dead person right now, since apparently they have no security whatsoever.
None.
Yeah.
If no, anybody
After
can just
already
walk on
having
stage.
the stage rushed at a previous event, you would think, I mean, I know he hasn't raised as much money as Hillary Clinton or a Jeb Bush or something like that, but you
Right.
can afford some private security.
And you got 12,000, some people say 20,000 people, or 28,000 at his event.
At the event he held later on, yeah.
There's going to be crazy. You need security. There's going to be, maybe there might be someone who's drunk.
Yeah.
Or somebody dropped acid. You need security to keep those people off the stage. I go to comedy clubs. There's bouncers at a fucking comedy club.
That's true,
You guys,
yeah.
they don't have as much security at a Bernie Sanders rally as I have at the Improv.
Yeah.
They should have more security.
I totally agree. I understand what, first of all, I should say their names. Marissa Janae Johnson and Mara Jacqueline Williford are the two co-founders of the Black Lives Matter Seattle chapter. And they are pointing out quite accurately that despite Seattle's history, or the belief that it's this bastion of liberalism, which I think in a lot of ways it does have a big police brutality problem of its own, which is 100% true. But you take that, which is a good point, and then you stand up on the stage next to a person who is theoretically a political ally of yours, a theoretical political ally, and then you shout to the entire audience that they're white supremacists and that they're supporting a white supremacist ideology. There are white supremacists in this country, some of them politically active. They probably weren't at the Bernie Sanders rally, though. And I understand that they are not prioritizing the legitimate grievances that you have, and they should prioritize them more. And Bernie Sanders, to his credit, as we're going to get to in just a minute, has put out his platform for reforming the criminal justice system in terms of police brutality. They're not white supremacists.
So what
I think you lose a lot of potential allies when you talk like that.
So what they're doing, John, is whether they know it or not, is they're engaging in politics, right? And so politics is the art of the possible. Mm-hmm. And it's about compromise, and politics is doing things smart, being able to get people on your side, knowing how to work issues, situations, how to gain support for your issue. This does all the opposite. This loses support for your issue. This alienates people who could be on your side. This not only alienates, this pushes them away. Calling people at a Bernie Sanders, instead of trying to say something that would get them on your side, you call them white supremacists. No matter if there's truth to what you're saying, I understand theoretically there's a truth that there's a white supremacist, but again, this doesn't help your cause. If you want to fuck your cause over, keep doing this.
Yeah.
So that won't help. That's not going to, there's a reason why Martin Luther King. Now, if I was around during the 60s, I would have been a Black Panther. I would have been the kind of guy picking up guns, let's go shoot the.
That is 100% accurate.
That's who I would have been, right? I would have been, but Martin Luther King knew politically that it was the death of the movement if they were violent. So he was, even though they were correct, they would have been justified in being violent. They would have been justified in beating back those cops who were cracking their heads and sicking the dogs on them and tear gassing them and beating them with sticks. They would have been right to fight back. But Martin Luther King was smarter politically, and he knew that what would eventually win the day was the video of those cops beating the shit out of them and them staying nonviolent.
Exactly.
He's playing the long game. He doesn't want to win the battle. He wanted to win the war. So these people won the battle at the Bernie Sanders Seattle speech, but they're going to lose the war because you're calling everybody who's the only people in the country who are going to be on your side, you're calling them white supremacists. That's bad politics. That's a bad move. Again, there might be substance to your case. That's the worst way in the world to possibly make that. Equating people who want to help you with people who are trying to kill you. That's a bad political move.
First of all, I don't want people, and this is a larger point I want to make, I don't want people interrupting political speeches like this almost ever. And I'm including when liberal groups interrupt conservative speeches and stuff like that. I generally don't think that's a good idea. I think that, it's just disruptive to, you have to be able to hold an event and speak and everything. I would say even if you were to tweak it a little bit, where they rush the stage, they speak and they deliver their message, which they did, and then turn it to Bernie Sanders and say, how do you respond to what we're saying to you right now?
Yes.
And that way, the spotlight's on him, the pressure's on him to directly respond to what you're saying. I don't even like this, but I'm saying this would be better. He does that, and then he goes on with the rally. You would still have some people who didn't like what you did, but I think that people would understand, you know what, they want answers. But here, he never got to speak, and it's happening over and over, and this isn't even particularly about the Black Lives. There's so many groups that have 100% legitimate grievances. Okay, if a gay or transgender organization, or if an environmental organization, any of these organizations that have, like if you're a climate change activist, which I think is one of the most important issues in the world right now, we can't just be rushing every stage that exists. And look, again, this is one chapter in a large movement. This doesn't necessarily say anything about the Black Lives Matter movement nationally. It's not like they're individually mandating everything that goes on. And as we have said, there are vigils going on and demonstrations going on in Ferguson right now for the anniversary. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. This is just one small part of that, but it is a small part that I think is going to do more damage than good overall. It's going to be very easy for Bill O'Reilly to just say, look at them. They can't even appease the liberals, let alone us conservatives. It's not their job to control or try to control what Bill O'Reilly says. I get that. But I think overall this hurts them quite a bit.
And there's another way to say it. You should say, even in the liberal land of Seattle, the most progressive city in America, there's still lots of blind spots. You guys still have blind spots because you don't know our experience. And that's what you need. You need to have a bigger dialogue. You guys have, yes, you guys are liberal. Yeah, you want to do the right thing. You have done the right thing in the past, but you have a blind spot that you're missing. That's another way to say it.
So we're never going to know if this is a direct result of his speech in Seattle being interrupted, but at the very beginning of this week, Bernie Sanders did release a platform of some of the proposed reforms that he'd like to put into place to deal with some of the police brutality issues that we have been dealing with as a country for the past few years. The platform delineates policy proposals pertaining to what Sanders calls the 4 central types of violence waged against black and brown Americans: physical, political, legal, and economic. Sanders proposes a series of police reforms, including the demilitarization of police forces, a federal program giving police body cameras, and increasing police transparency and accountability. He also calls for an end to mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent offenses and bemoans the disproportional rate at which blacks are targeted by police. And he said specifically, we must address the lingering unjust stereotypes that lead to the labeling of black youths as thugs. We know the truth that, like every community in this country, the vast majority of people of color are trying to work hard, play by the rules, and raise their children. It's time to stop demonizing minority communities. Now, look, proposing this as a package of laws and actually becoming president and making it a law is not the same thing, but so far he seems like the sort of person that I feel will actually follow through on this. And so, I don't know if this is a direct result of the protest that interrupted his speech a couple of days ago, or if this is something that he was planning already. It seems to be in line with the positions he already had before. It is both timely and I think would do a lot to help to combat some of the culture that has led to the police excesses that we've seen in the past few years.
He's certainly more progressive than the first black president ever.
On this issue, perhaps. Obama has proposed some reforms to his credit.
Bill Clinton.
There you go.
I was talking about Bill Clinton.